the way, the Pope at the time, Europe was dominantly Catholic. And the government of Europe was, you had the Pope, you had the kings, and then you had the people. The Pope ruled over the kings, and the kings ruled over the people. That was the structure of government. Well, when Henry VIII, as we know, established the Anglican Church of England, the Protestant Church, then you had Bloody Mary that came in after he died. Bloody Mary dies, then Elizabeth comes to the throne. Well, the Pope denounced Elizabeth and basically called for her assassination. So you had all of these assassins going out trying to wipe out Elizabeth. Well, the English banded around Queen Elizabeth with Sir Francis Walsingham, and they formed this network, basically an intelligence system. And that intelligence system, according to certain English historians that I'm going to introduce you to here in just a minute, was the early Rosicrucian movement in England. It was founded initially for the purpose of protecting Queen Elizabeth. Okay? Which sounds like a noble thing, but admittedly, the guys who study the Rosicrucians admit that they had an inner agenda, and it was an esoteric agenda. And this is something that guys like Hall and others write about. And their inner agenda was to basically hide themselves within the Protestant movement, the Protestant Christian movement. Why? Because at that time, if you were worshiping like the gods, the muses of Sir Francis Bacon, Apollo and Athena, we show in the documentary he had this headpiece, 2 A's, a light A and a dark A. The light side and the dark side, the yin and the yang, but for him it was Apollo, the god Apollo, and then Pallas Athena, his counterpart. Okay? Well, if you made that known openly, whether you were in Catholic Europe or you were in Protestant Europe, they'd throw you in prison and possibly kill you. So this is if you interview these guys, they all say the same thing, that this was the reason that secret societies began. That they began because they had to keep what they really believed secret. And what they really believed were these occult doctrines. Okay, so from Rosicrucianism, Sir Francis Bacon formalized that system, because in Rosicrucianism you have openly the conjuring of demons. The first chief of the Rosicrucian order was a guy named Dr. John Dee that we talk about. Well, Dee was a mentor to Sir Francis Bacon. Dee is where with Bacon you read his writings and you kind of go back and forth, gee, what am I getting involved in? In Dee, with John Dee, you have a guy who's drawn a pentagram on the floor and summoning demons in no uncertain way. But Dee has been a prototype for a lot of interesting characters in literature. He was the inspiration for Prospero in Shakespeare's Tempest. Some believe he was the inspiration for King Lear. He was the inspiration for Dr. Faustus, Christopher Marlowe's play. In modern times, he was the inspiration for Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, the old wizard. He was the inspiration for Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter books, the old magician, who's the professor going around teaching and so on. And he was also, oddly enough, the inspiration for James Bond 007. When the Rosicrucians were formed, and they formed this intelligence network with secret codes and everything, Dee would sign his correspondence to the Queen 007. Okay? So that was his signature. And so that's where that comes from. And Ian Fleming got a hold of this, and he developed it, and it ultimately turned into James Bond. But it's believed that Bacon, because Dee handed off the leadership of the Rosicrucians to Sir Francis Bacon. And Sir Francis Bacon became the leader of the Rosicrucians. So he took that system. What I think he did was he got the magical side out of it. Because the Rosicrucians don't have any problem summoning demons at all. They think, hey, these demons have a lot of knowledge. Chances are communing with these spirits and so on is how the Egyptians learned how to build the pyramids, and these ancient societies did great things. Why? Because they gained knowledge from the spirit realm. So they didn't think this was a bad thing, because they were trying to pursue this knowledge supposedly for the benefit of mankind. And this is why Bacon became, I believe, part of the reason why he became known as the father of the modern scientific method. He was the guy who developed the method that would later be adopted by guys like Sir John Locke, Sir Isaac Newton, even Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson considered Francis Bacon one of the 3 most important men in history. And Jefferson, according to Baconians and others, Jefferson believed that he was fulfilling Bacon's desire for a new Atlantis in founding the United States. Now I want to introduce you to this guy. A lot of our information about Bacon, while there's just hundreds of books that have been written on him, if you know where to look for him, a lot of our information comes from a guy named Peter Dawkins. And Peter Dawkins is an Englishman. He is very much into the New Age, into esoteric wisdom. He's a very nice man, but he's deeply involved in the occult. And Peter Dawkins is the founder and president of an organization called the Francis Bacon Research Trust in England. And it's just outside of Stratford-upon-Avon in a place called Upper Tysoe. And we interview him in Secret Mysteries. You'll see him there. A very eloquent fellow, deeply involved in New Age eschatology and theology and so on. And he tells us that he believed that Sir Francis Bacon was the reincarnation of Elias the artist, meaning Elijah. Why? Because he says Elijah comes every few generations and so on to herald the coming of the Christ. And so he believed that Bacon's job, part of Bacon's job, was to herald the coming of the next Christ. Okay, this was Bacon's job. Now, I'm going to follow that thought here in just a minute. Dawkins' work is supported by this guy. Now, let me tell you how this happened. I actually found Peter Dawkins when I was researching PRS, the Philosophical Research Society, Manly Hall Society. Okay, Dawkins had been invited there to speak on his stuff on Bacon, and of course they love Bacon at PRS because of Manly Hall. Bacon was Manly Hall's favorite subject. Of all the stuff that he studied, it said that Hall was his favorite topic, and his wife, Marie Bauer Hall, was completely given over to Baconian philosophy and so on. So I wanted to get into a place called Canonbury Tower, which is in England, and it's where Bacon had lived prior to his death. And it's believed that he began the Invisible College at this place called Canonbury Tower, and that he held a lot of his meetings with the Masons and the Rosicrucians there. Okay? And when you go there, we show, in Secret Mysteries, we show a lot of the original wood carvings that they had. And you see a couple of phoenix heads coming up. There's in the wood, I didn't point it out, but I'm going to sooner or later, the Masonic compass on the wall, and all of these really rich esoteric symbols that are carved into the wood there. Well, Peter Dawkins told me, he said, well, if you want to get permission, contact this woman. Her name was Carol. And so I did. I sent her an email and called and left a message. Well, a couple of days later, I got an email. And the email said, "Dear Mr. Pinto, I understand you're trying to gain access to Canonbury Tower for your film. I said, I would love to help you, but I'm going to need some more information, blah, blah, blah. Sincerely, Lord Northampton." So I'm sitting here looking at this email, and I'm thinking, how often do you get an email from a guy named Lord Northampton? So I talked to Peter Dawkins a few days later, and I say, well, I got this email from this guy named Lord Northampton. Do you know who he is? And he says, oh, yes. He says, he's the Marquis de Northampton. And I said, oh, okay, what does that mean? And he said, well, the Marquis de Northampton is known as the Pro-Grand Master of British Freemasonry. Now let me explain to you what this means, because it took me a while to figure it out. But you can actually find all of this online. The Grand Master of British Freemasonry is this fellow, the Earl of Kent, a member of the royal family. He is the Grand Master of British Freemasonry. He's a cousin to the Queen, Queen Elizabeth, and to the Duke of Edinburgh. Because he is a member of the royal family, as the Grand Master, he can appoint a pro-Grand Master who acts in his place. Okay? Because he's busy being royalty, somebody else makes all of the certain decisions and goes and meets everybody, etc., and so on. So as Pro-Grand Master, the Marquis de Northampton, who fulfills that role, is the acting head of all British Freemasonry. And here I say he's arguably the most powerful Mason in the world. Why? Because if you interview Masons,